Mhm.
We absolutely know who the people in our interest groups happen to be. We're just connecting differently. Community is sacrifice. You need to perform sacrifice in order to make sure that these things work. And that means, investing yourself, but also like planning and showing up. If you don't monetize the community, either through a membership access fee or a course model or a special group or a think tank within the community, it can quickly become something that's it's a time suck. Cults call that love bombing, right? The new people that come into the community, you surround them and you talk about how awesome they are and how clever they are, and then they never want to leave. Well, we do a version of that, but it's just a little more socially acceptable.
This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast, where we are here to educate, equip, and inspire people to build extraordinary companies. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can get updates every time we drop a new episode. Now, let's get it started. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins. I'm going to be your host today. And in the studio, we're featuring Todd Nilson. How are you today?
Doing really well, Rick. Nice to see you.
You as well, my friend. You as well, my friend. I've been looking forward to this interview. We had such great conversations in the past. So I'm looking forward to taking it on the road, so to speak. Do us a favor, give our audience a little bit of your background, who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do.
Yeah, so thanks for that. I have been working in a very specific niche for really about the past 15 years or so. I help organizations and businesses set up and run online spaces that don't suck. So basically, like online communities, gathering places, not big social media, not LinkedIn, not Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
but a little bit more discreet, little cozier places online where people can get together, connect with like-minded people, exchange ideas, make better friendships, do good stuff together. And this is my life's work. I have had the wonderful opportunity to work with everything from small startups to nonprofit organizations that have like a mission to save the world, to tech businesses that want to have a space for their employees to work better together or for their customers to solve problems and do stuff with their software. So communities of all types, I've helped dozens of them over the years. And that connection between the online and the offline is one that I'm particularly interested in. Get people that are meeting for a conference or events or like a local chapter or group and enable them in online spaces to really amp up that sense of connection and really end loneliness, which, as you know, is an epidemic, not just in our country, but in many others as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What made you get into this? What's your why? Is this connected to like a personal purpose, or is this just something that you were interested in, or?
I think it's something that's always been in my DNA. I'm a question asker, and I like to meet new people and learn about them. Originally, that came out in ways like I was in the performing arts for some years. I studied to be a journalist. I love like interviewing people, finding out what makes them, what makes them light up. And
Mm-hmm.
then I think that kind of turned into a yen for building clubs, building groups, and then translating that into online spaces. I really became a big proponent of the early social media movement in the early 2000s and word of mouth marketing. And it really just feels like a culmination of my interests that have sort of like layered up onto each other over the years.
So you took your passion for asking questions, connecting with people, and turned it into created spaces where other people could do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Why don't we make spaces where it's easier for people to get together and chat with each other? And, I think increasingly today, we maybe don't know who our next door neighbors are,
Mm-hmm.
but we absolutely know who the people in our interest groups happen to be. We're just connecting differently in the 21st century. And that means that the tools that we use to do that need to be deployed in an open-hearted, empathetic way as much as possible. And so for me, I saw these technologies as a way to bring people together. And I said, challenge accepted. Let's try to do this work.
It's funny. I read this book like many moons ago by Alex Asimov. He was one of the consultants for Star Trek.
Yeah.
He's just like sci-fi forward thinking guy. The book was called Robots of the Dawn, and people were actually living, I think, on like Mars or something like that, and so they would only communicate like digitally. And I saw this, and I'm just like, oh, that's so cool. That's like 20 years ago, you know? And
Yeah.
so now it's a thing. Now it's a thing. And the funny thing is it was like just so natural for people. People didn't think about like meeting people in person. And when someone met in person, it was just like, oh my gosh, you're actually here. I love that book. It was in the iRobot series. It's the same guy that wrote iRobot, if you
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
that movie.
Asimov. Yeah, I love his work. I love that earlier, hopeful, optimistic science fiction. I'm probably more of a Star Trek than a Star Wars. I'm more utopian than dystopian, but
Okay.
I can appreciate both. I love them both, but yeah, I don't
That's
want to
awesome.
get hate mail from the Star Wars fans. I saw the first movie in the theater, so I was there when the deep magic
You
started.
dated yourself.
I did.
I was too young, but I remember my cousin went to see it in like I don't know if we had IMAX back then, but she was saying it was like this theater and they had like I think it was like three screens. It was like almost like surround sound had like just come out.
Yeah, THX, right? Yeah, 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 right.
I had no concept of it, you know. But my question was, you know, a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, there's an argument. There are people that are saying that the in-person connection is not as effective online. I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Well, it's different. There's no substitute for being in the same room with someone, where you get, I mean, I'm not going to get woo about this, but you get a vibe, from,
Yeah.
being in the room with someone, and there's a personal nature to that connection, the eye contact, you see full body context of how they're communicating. That just doesn't translate into an online space.
Yeah.
It's gotten a lot better. Like, you and I can sit in this virtual studio and talk to each other. I feel like you're across the table from me, and that is cool. And I get a lot of context from that. Sometimes in online spaces, you're limited to text and emojis and the occasional funny GIF, or meme. And we've just found different ways to express ourselves, to express emotion and nuance in those spaces. And we're still just getting better at it.
Yeah.
We've had these internet technologies now, like, I'd say, like, at mass scale for decades now, but I think there's still a digital maturity level that is still growing, and we're going to get better at it. The tools, the technologies are going to get better at tearing down the social barriers of expression in these spaces. So I'm personally excited about XR, virtual reality kinds of contexts, where the idea of an online community may, in, I don't know, a decade or two, be a matter of me putting on my glasses and being in an augmented reality environment where you literally do look like you're across the table from me. And we're having conversations in a virtualized setting. And there's a sense of proximity between us. As if you were sitting 4 to 6 feet away, there would be a sense of sound, like that surround sound idea. Like, you would hear somebody passing by, in a virtual environment. I mean, it'll be like talking to ghosts.
It's interesting. You describe it like that. I wonder, you know, about the give and take. So for example, like I love the idea of talking to people around the world. I absolutely love it. You know, it's like, you know, if I'm talking to somebody in Australia or somebody in, you know, Africa or Europe or wherever, it's, you know, same thing right across the screen. And I wouldn't be able to do that, you know, otherwise. You know, or a friend of mine, she said she and her family have like an online date where they'll have like 30 or 40 people on a Zoom call, you know, having this conversation and just enjoying each other's presence. So you get, you know, it's really interesting that kind of push pull that you have between the virtual community and the benefits there versus the in person, as you were talking about earlier. You have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that organizations, social groups are coming to a realization that it's not always possible to get together face to face.
Yeah.
And as much as we may have a deep, warm friendship, in a one-on-one basis, I can't meet my friend in India like day for coffee or breakfast. Like, but I could have a WhatsApp, conversation with them, or I can have a Zoom call and we could all get together. And so the opportunity for these tools to further and deepen our relationships with others is quite powerful. And I think for organizations, that means going beyond an annual conference or the occasional workshop to having, continuous interaction with that brand or that nonprofit throughout the year, and to stay highly engaged with the messages, from that group and the other people in that group, and really develop a sense of belonging. It's a lifeline for many people who feel disconnected from maybe others in their direct neighborhood, but have really developed a deep friendship with someone else over time. We've taken the idea of a pen pal and virtualized it, in the best possible ways.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What's going through my brain is I have a friend that like plays Grand Theft Auto online with like, like the
Yeah.
reality, like
You get
has
your
a
crew,
job,
right?
has
Yeah.
a car, has an apartment, toured out. It's interesting because like she meets with the same people all the time. They have these conversations. They have a community. They have a neighborhood. Same thing like you're saying. And I know we're totally off the reservation, but
Not
but
at
I mean
all.
it's like
Yeah.
the digital connection is really evolved, like you were alluding to, like in such a great way. So my question for you is, how did you know what was your business case? How did you know this was something that was actually gonna make money for you?
I think the answer to that came on a couple of different fronts. One came from my early and long-standing and abiding interest in tabletop role-playing games. I started out as an early Dungeons and Dragons nerd, started
Indeed.
playing in 1980, never stopped playing. In fact, I had a game just the other night. Uh, but we play online now. So like there are differences, around how you do things anymore. I think that I think what gave me the bug, for these kinds of, opportunities to join and be connected to others came from that intimate experience of being around the table with a group of friends and sharing a reality of sorts, like a storytelling environment, the equivalent of ancient people gathering around a campfire and telling each other stories.
Yeah.
That there was something incredibly powerful about that I think has sort of stayed in my brain all of these years. And so I think that for me was one point where I said, okay, well, there's value to that. And then the other was as someone who was a developing business person in the late 90s, early 2000s, understanding that these tools that were coming into play were a chance to start connecting people at scale. I was a recruiter at the time. I was a tech recruiter helping people find jobs
Hmm.
in the Chicagoland, Wisconsin markets. And I really enjoyed, the challenges of that particular work. But as soon as LinkedIn started coming online, as soon as I started seeing that and that combined with, again, coming back to my hobby interests, playing some online games and seeing people who were connecting with IRC, Internet Relay Chat, for those of you who wouldn't recognize that. It's basically live chat rooms and wikis and discussion forums, the old school discussion boards, recognizing that you could connect people at scale in these spaces and really, build something for your business around it. Like I saw the personal side of it then, but being a business person, connecting people, I saw that there was a lot of power to that. I'd say around 2008, 2009, when there was the big tech downturn, I started doing a couple of live events, a series of live events with some other volunteers. We did this thing called Milwaukee Job Camp, which was kind of our answer to why job fairs suck. And we wanted to something a little bit more positive and productive for people who found themselves out of work. And we basically created something along the lines of an unconference at the time where, it was a developing agenda and we had sort of a carnival atmosphere. And there were people there that, we had gotten a series of computers and set them up on the internet and had some photographers there. So like if you had never had a LinkedIn profile before, you could get one there just by going to the event. We had HR and recruiting people there to review your resume or do mock interviews. We had a bunch of motivational speakers, career coaches who were in the space. And so that event was completely built at scale through organic social media outreach at the time. And we were able to help. We ran the event 4 times. We were able to help thousands of people in each one of those sessions. And I think for me, that was like the turning point in my brain where I said, this is a viable business. And I recognized that was going to be a change in my career away from recruiting where you were helping people one-to-one to helping organizations tell their stories, helping people to connect to each other more broadly in online spaces. So that's when I made a move. I joined an agency at the time and they were dedicated to building online communities. And that kind of put me on the path from there on out.
Wow. Wow. That's cool. So you went from recruiting to joining an agency. At what point? Tell me the story about how you ended up starting your company.
Yeah. So I was working at this agency and great organization. Still have a lot of friends who worked there and who I've stayed in touch with over the years. We primarily did our work in the US, but I was always on a plane I was always going someplace, a client site, running workshops. I managed teams that like developers and designers who would actually set up and launch online communities for enterprises. So I worked with some big tech companies. I worked with some interesting nonprofits as well, and we would deploy these online communities for organizations. But the two things happened. One was I think it was wearing on me because 50, 60-hour work weeks will catch up with you after a while. And by that point in my career, I wasn't a kid. I wasn't feeling it yet, but it was starting to get a little bit tiresome. And so like it was a bad sign when I was dreaming in spreadsheets. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
You don't want to ever dream in spreadsheets. It's not a good thing. But the second thing was my folks were getting older, and I was worried about taking care of them, and I didn't want to always like have to be hopping on a plane to come back. Like I wanted to have a little more active hand in spending time with them as they were winding down. So I left. I left the agency and decided like I still wanted to do this work. And so just through some very happy networking that I did from some colleagues I love and still stay in touch with, they introduced me to a colleague based out of London, really well-known guy in the community space, Richard Millington with Feverby. Shout out to you, Richard, if you listen to this. And it was an opportunity for me to just kind of build a more independent career at that point. So because he was in London, I started an LLC, Clocktower Advisors, my company. And from there on, he was my primary client to begin with. We just built corp to corp. And then about a year and a half later, I went independent and we, amicably parted ways. Ever since then, since about 2017, I was just managing my own business and a portfolio of customers from there, and never looked back. It's wonderful to be an independent business owner. I just celebrated 10 years in business. Yeah, so I would recommend it to anybody that has a vision for what they want to do, what they want to build. But it's been very viable. I've been able to make a good living at it. I'm not a rich guy, but I'm doing okay, and I think that the opportunities to help people who want to be helped. As an independent business owner, you can kind of pick and choose who you want to work with. I think it's the best possible way to do business in the world these days.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Tell me something. You say you're not a rich man, but I mean, haven't you impacted like a lot of lives?
Well, okay, so monetarily, I'm no millionaire, but I think absolutely, yeah, I am absolutely rich in the sense that I feel like I've been able to help a lot of people over the years just by creating spaces for them to be together. I always like to share one of the customers that I currently work with right now is a very large community that's dedicated to help people quit smoking or vaping. And the people in that community, you ask them about like, what's the value of having this online space for themselves? They will very quickly tell you, I'm alive today because of this community and because they were able to get support and care, both emotional, spiritual, and factual, support for their quit that they maybe weren't able to get from a spouse or from family. Maybe they didn't feel comfortable sharing with those things, but they could come into this community anonymously, share where they were, or share that they tried to quit smoking and they lapsed, and they find forgiveness and support and empathy and understanding, for their situations. And man, that's powerful work to be able to be a part of that and to be able to help architect the spaces and experiences that you can have online around those kinds of things.
Wow, that's beautiful, man. That's beautiful. I think I would say that I underestimate what it takes to run a community. I've seen, communities pop up and then, kind of fizzle out. And what does it take to keep a community vibrant? What does it take to keep like the energy going?
Yeah. Have you ever seen the musical Little Shop of Horrors?
I saw the movie.
Yeah, the movie. Yeah, yeah. So like Rick Moranis is kind of like the shop guy, the little shop nerd, and he
Yeah.
comes up with little Audrey, the plant that's the carnivorous plant, right? And he cuts his finger, and then it ends up that the plant is kind of sucking the blood from him,
Uh-huh.
the famous saying is "Feed me, Seymour," right?
I can't
Um,
wait to see where you go with this.
I'm gonna make the wild statement that I mean to get a community going, you got to put a little bit of your blood into it. It's not an easy thing. It's not easy money. I think a lot of creators, a lot of solopreneurs decide to go the direction of creating an online community for their customers or their prospects. And they learn very quickly that it can eat all of your time if you haven't done it, in a thoughtful way, if you haven't figured out how to enable people in the space, if you haven't figured out exactly what it is that they want. And you really do have to put something of yourself into it. Otherwise it will fail. And I'm thinking and writing about that a lot right now as a process. And so, I was on another podcast recently, and the gentleman, Jeffrey Rowe, shout out to him too, said, hey, if you had to, kind of boil down, what is community building in one word or phrase? And I said, community is sacrifice. You need to perform a little bit of sacrifice in order to make sure that these things work. And that means, investing yourself, but also like planning and showing up and being there every day. It can create a lot of benefits, but if you're looking for a quick turnaround benefit, it's not going to be, you'll be disappointed in it, because community is a program, not a project. It means you've got to look at it as a race that is more of a marathon than a sprint. And so these platforms are very deceptively easy to set up. Like, oh, I'm gonna get School, or I'm gonna get Circle, or I'll spin up a Slack. And like you said, like a lot of them just fizzle out because they haven't adequately expressed what the purpose of the space is. They haven't validated that with the people that they think they want to connect with. They haven't planned what happens once people get in and they start doing some things. And then like, well, what do I do now here in the community? If that's a question, there's a problem with how you've planned that experience for everyone. So I think a lot of would-be community builders come in thinking that it's, the same as a lot of other marketing techniques, and then are greatly surprised when they find out that it doesn't just sort of run itself after a period of time. No community runs itself. Like, there are always people that end up stepping up, even in the early hobby communities of the 80s and 90s, like bulletin boards and chat rooms and AOL. Like, there are always people that stepped up as moderators of those spaces.
Right.
You need to manage them. It's just like a garden. An untended garden grows a lot of weeds. So it requires some pruning to make sure that things grow beautifully, and that there's a structure, to what you're creating. And if you don't have these places under management, they'll very quickly grow in ways that you don't expect and are not giving value to you.
Walk me through, like, in a generic sense, if that's possible. Say I wanted to create a community for entrepreneurs that, enjoy playing video games. I don't know. Walk me through that process of how I would, begin that planning and figuring out like how to make it, not just setting it up, but how to make it work.
Yeah. So I'm going to assume that you had at least a small group of colleagues who are entrepreneurs that are fanatics about video games, right? And so, like, my first question to you is, why do you think they want an online community? Really kind of examining the motivations for that space. Now, I think what works well about that is the concept is including at least two demographic markers or maybe psychographic markers that help me to say this could be a really niched community idea. If something sounds, pretty generic, like a community for business owners, it's hard to build a sense of belonging in a space like that because it's just so darn broad, But if you're building a community for women who are firefighters, yeah, that's cool. Or you're building for a community of business owners, entrepreneurs who are game fanatics. That's a good starting concept to start with. So first of all, I'd be wanting to beat up that concept with you a little bit and sort of think about like, okay, what is the connection between these two interests and how does one inform the other? What kind of benefits are there? What kinds of things would people, do and say in this community? What are the conversations going to be about? Are you going to run events? If so, how often? What are they going to be about? Are you going to do coursework in there? Am I going to have game designers come in and help inform like how people build their entrepreneurial journeys? Because I think there's the idea of journey mapping in building game products. Are those things even applicable to becoming to being an entrepreneur and building your business concept? Maybe so. Maybe we can kind of build an entire curriculum around how that works.
Hmm.
So events, learning, station, these are the keys, like understanding what that program is, and then really kind of mapping out our understanding of what that journey is for those members over the first 30 days, which are key to really getting people bought into whatever that environment is. And then going out to some of those friends that you may already know who are in that space and who are like that perfect demographic for you, talking to them about what they want or what they'd like to see, or like what kind of connections do you see around this thing? These are the people that might end up being your earliest users that you bring into the community. And I think the insights that you get from talking to them will not only help you build a stronger program to engage them, but it will also help you decide what's the right software platform to pick. A lot of people want to pick the software first. That's usually not the best starting place. It's only the best starting place in as much as it's the thing people want to talk about first.
Hmm.
So we could talk about it, but then we're going to put it back, until we deal with some of the more foundational questions. So once you've picked that and you've set up that initial community space, the first 5 to 15 people that you invite into that space are the most crucial, because they need to be that really narrow band of people who will be your super users in the community. And they need to be, I always call them like willing co-conspirators. They need to be like into this idea enough that they're going to be in the community on a daily basis, during this first, whatever you want to call it, early beta pilot phase, of the community. And they're going to be talking about stuff that they care about. And you're going to be asking them questions. You're going to maybe have like some Zoom events, maybe some early, educational opportunities, things like that, that starts to populate that community space, because there's nothing worse than opening up a community to the world and a bunch of people come in, they look around, they see there's nothing to do, and they never come back again.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the nightmare scenario. So ensuring that you have a place that looks a little bit lived in, that there are some active people talking there, and that when I post for the first time, because that's putting myself out there, and it comes back to what we said in the beginning, really we kind of have text to interact with each other in community environments these days. I need to make sure that when I'm posting, when I've gotten up the nerve to post for the first time, that it's maybe something easy enough that's been asked of me, not just, hey, come and introduce yourself, but hey, what's your favorite game to play, and how does it remind you of being an entrepreneur? That'd be a great opening question for that community, maybe. And so making sure that when people do post for the first time, that it's not just you as the founder that's responding to them, which is great, but it's also those early co-conspirators who are jumping in and welcoming the newcomer as well. Cults call that love bombing, right? Like you come in and you just kind of love bomb it, the new people that come into the community, you surround them and you talk about how awesome they are and how clever they are, and then they never want to leave. Well, we do a version of that, but it's just a little more socially acceptable. We're not trying to cult brainwash anybody. We're trying to make them feel a part and that they belong, and that they've made the right choice in their limited time and attention that they have to spend time in that particular community. So that's what I mean by you gotta open a vein if you wanna run a community.
I love that. Open a vein. That's awesome. I'm not going to let my mom listen to this episode. I'm just kidding.
By the way, to be clear, I am not advocating blood sacrifice. That's only in my Dungeons and Dragons games.
Thank you. I'm actually going to have to put that across the bottom of the screen. No one is hurt, no one is harmed in the creation of this podcast.
I love it, man.
One of the things I'm curious about, I do product development work. And so one of the things I'm thinking about is there a scenario wherein we would say we expect people to come, making a rational avatar, so to speak. We expect people to come into this community and act a certain way and engage at a certain level and in order to, um, I don't know, perhaps it's market to the right people, perhaps to create the right environment or whatever. So, and then saying it differently, what responsibilities would you expect a member of the community to have, or how do you kind of dictate that or direct that or create that expectation?
Yeah, so I would never go to market with a community if you didn't have some guidelines in terms of service, in place, for the
Hmm.
experience. There need to be some rules of the road. As much as a lot of people come in and scream like, freedom of speech online, and I'm a huge proponent of freedom of speech. But the fact of the matter is, if I am paying for this platform for places, for people to come and interact, I got a right to say what the rules are in my house, and I can kick you out for any reason whatsoever. So like if you walk into my house and you start walking all over the furniture and spilling drinks all over the place and writing on the wall with magic markers, I'm going to probably ask you to leave. First of all, I'll probably say, "Hey, cut it out," and why are you being a jerk? After that, I'm going to say, all right, time out. You know what? Get out of here. Come back tomorrow when you're in a better mood. And eventually I'm going to say, you know what? You're not welcome back in my house anymore.
Yeah.
And so like you need to have sort of expectation setting around what those rules are. And then you need to manage your house by those rules. So like if you start applying those rules, you need to be sure that you're referring back to that rule set anytime someone is stepping over the line with ways, that they should do, and they're being a knucklehead, for one reason or another. So having those rules in place is great. The other piece of it is the guidelines. I like guidelines over rules. I take that from a really brilliant person, Dr. Ruth Diaz, who did something called the Troll Project some time ago. She's a colleague and a friend. But the idea of like calling something community guidelines as opposed to community rules, it's less punitive sounding. Mm-hmm. It's more guidance sounding. It's a little softer, and it's I think a better fit for the idea of creating a sense of community, of belonging. The other piece is you really need to have those early members in place because they are helping to set the social norms for that space. They're modeling the behaviors that others will copy when they come into the space. So then when they see like how people are, that's what we mean when we talk about like, does the community have a vibe? What's the feel of the place? Like you start to very quickly get that from when you see how people interact with each other, when you see how they rate a post, the kinds of things they ask. Hey, is it okay to use emojis in this environment? What's considered, what is considered over the line or rude, in this space? It's like things aren't necessarily wrong to do, but like if you do them, people might not want to interact with you as much. And so like understanding at an implicit level, what some of those things are is, modeling the behaviors is also extremely.
Yeah. I can imagine. I'm laughing kind of about the rules and guidelines thing. I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to pose the question to you: are speed limits rules or guidelines?
Well, that's a rule. That's a law. I might let you go. If I'm a cop, I might let you go 5 miles an hour over the speed limit.
Apparently you haven't been driving in Atlanta, because if you go 5 miles over the speed limit, you're probably going to get run off the road.
You're right over, right. Yeah. So I live in a rural area, man.
Amazing. What was an amazing project for you?
There've been so many over the years. The one I mentioned to you earlier, the Truth Initiatives, xprogram.com, that one is one I come back to again and again. I did a project and worked with a company for a number of years that was trying to enable engineering professors, like undergraduate, professors or professors over undergraduate programs, to incorporate more entrepreneurial thinking into their classroom, into their classes. And that was a really unique community that I was proud of, because we built out something that the professors or the instructors could build a course outline. They called them cards in the space, and then work on them collaboratively with instructors from other universities. So they built this great body of knowledge using some custom built components to build the experience. And the idea behind it is how many US institutions that have an engineering program can we affect in positive ways and affect the character and mindset of young people who are going to be going out into the workplace in future years. And so like that, those kinds of impact things are wild. Like I've done a project with Greenpeace. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of organizations involved in mental health. Those are always feel good things, but I like the tech company projects as well. I haven't had a chance to work with an AI company yet. If there's any of them out there that want to, consult with me or look at me as a fractional head of community, I'm happy to have a chat with you. But the mission built stuff is, I think, super important to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those are super important. One of the we talk about a number of different types of communities. Tell me about the monetization model. So if we're looking at a business, whatever size company, they're going to build something that eventually they're going to charge people for. What is that what does that map look like? So for example, you might launch your MVP and let, certain people in, at discount or, or open it up for free for everyone for a while. And then at a certain time you flip the switch and say, okay, I'm going to charge you X dollars per month, or what have you seen that works really?
I mean, I think there are a lot of people who've made it work. I was just on a call this morning with it was a live stream on LinkedIn with the founder of Heartbeat, which is a really good community platform that's out there, and they were talking about one of the guests there. Her name is Leah. She's got a community of maybe about 500 people, but it's probably one of the highest grossing communities that they have amongst their 7,000 subscribers. So like think 7,000 communities just on that particular platform. And hers is extremely successful, in terms of monetization. I think when they work, there's usually like an application process. So there's a little bit of a sense of scarcity. I think hers was interesting too, because she has a cap of like 25 members a month for all that can get in. Maybe that's maybe a little artificial. If you look at a community of 500, 25 people in a month, that's maybe a little above what you maybe would get, coming in the door, but still it's all in the framing of it. There's this sense of value, like, oh, I have to apply to get in and there's only this many people accepted, then, when you're paying the price to get in, it's almost like a tuition or an expectation. Like with this membership, I am expected to be a contributor, to the space. And again, I think that comes back to the psychology of trying to make sure that these communities don't fizzle. If you can join a community for free, it's a lot harder for people to feel that sense of value around it, even though there are some really great, and I run one too, that online communities, if I can join it for free, maybe it's not quite as cool or as valuable. You got to work harder, to make people understand the value, for those. So if you set a price tag on it, and even a small dollar amount, $5-10 a month for that, if you can get enough people in at scale, then the monetization of it can work. If you don't monetize the community in some way, either through a membership access fee or a course model, like where you can sign up for courses and events when you get into the community, and some of those are paid and some of them are free, or maybe like a special group or a think tank within the community, so like a subgroup within the space, then you can, if you don't charge for those things, it can quickly become something that's a time suck and drain for you. And so like, while you might in your heart want to offer it for free, you got to charge something just to be able to sustain it, and make it work. And so I think, when you're going into it, you need to think about like whether you are approaching community as something that you want to be a revenue neutral or a revenue positive driver. And that's going to affect how aggressively you drive the money side of it, for the business.
Sure. So we're just about out of time. What would you recommend what is something that you want to leave with our audience? Perhaps, something to help them win at whatever it is that they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, so I would say if you are running a business and at least part of what you're doing is trying to ensure long-term commitment to whatever your brand or service is, a community might be something you want to look at. If you're looking for a quick hit, a quick turn, build a big audience, get a lot of awareness for your product and splash, community ain't the tool for that. It is for the full life cycle of a customer. It's for brand loyalty. It's for referrals, testimonials. It's to help your people feel more connected to you, your brand, and to each other in that order. And I think that if there's just one thing that I leave everyone with, it's that they need to think long and hard about it before they commit to it, because it's not a small amount of work, but it can pay off in ways that make your heart grow.
Todd Nilson, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
It was an honor to be invited, Rick. I'm an avid follower of your show, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
All right. Sounds like a plan. Folks, thank you so much for watching or listening to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. Keep winning.